Hell no. I haven't watched a lick of the WNBA. I don't know what's going on. I talked to my teammates like the day.
Breaking news. Sophie Cunningham just completely lit up the WNBA headlines with one of the most unapologetic, brutally honest interviews fans have seen in years. No filters, no media training, no watered-down PR answers, just Sophie, sitting in front of a mic, sipping coffee, and saying everything that's been simmering under the surface for months. The internet couldn't get enough of it. Overnight, her words spread like wildfire across social media, turning one laid-back podcast into one of the most talked-about sports interviews of the year. But this isn't just about Sophie Cunningham going off. This is about the moment she said out loud what everyone else in the WNBA whispers behind closed doors. Now, for those who somehow missed the spark that set this off, here's the backstory. It all started with something small. So small, it shouldn't have even been a headline. The Indianapolis Colts hosted the Indiana Fever at one of their games. It was supposed to be a light-hearted crossover moment between the WNBA and the NFL. The Colts handed out custom jerseys to every Fever player, a simple gesture meant to celebrate Indiana's growing sports unity. Every player smiled, posed, and threw their jersey on. Well, almost every player. Because when Caitlyn Clark, the Fever's rookie phenomenon, the player who's practically carried the WNBA's media coverage this season, was handed her Colts jersey, she didn't put it on. Instead, she just held it up. No dramatic statement, no protest, no explanation. Just a polite smile and a simple gesture that said, "Thanks, but I'll pass." And here's the thing. Caitlyn grew up in Iowa. She's not just any fan, she's a die-hard Kansas City Chiefs supporter. She's said it before, proudly. So when she didn't wear that Colts jersey, the internet didn't see disrespect. They saw loyalty. They saw authenticity. They saw a player who didn't fake enthusiasm for the cameras, who didn't play along just to make everyone else comfortable. Within hours, social media exploded. Fans flooded Twitter and TikTok, calling her a real one, a true fan, someone who doesn't fold for PR. And right in the middle of that internet storm came Sophie Cunningham. Now, if there's one thing anyone knows about Sophie, it's that she doesn't hold back. Never has, never will. Whether it's calling out her own team, roasting the WNBA front office, or dropping a few unfiltered lines that leave everyone else scrambling to catch up. Speaking her mind is Sophie's brand. So when she jumped on the Show Me Something podcast in her home state of Missouri, the vibe was chill. She was just hanging out, sipping coffee, chatting with friends. No script, no agenda, no PR handler hovering nearby. But that relaxed setup became the stage for something way bigger. Because halfway through a casual conversation about horses, family, and off-season plans, Sophie did what she does best. She spoke her mind. She brought up the Caitlyn Clark jersey moment, and suddenly, the tone shifted. Sophie laughed, leaned back, and said, "That was awesome. I hope Caitlyn knows how cool that was." Simple words, right? But it was the way she said it, the admiration, the excitement, the raw respect that got people talking. She wasn't mocking Caitlyn. She was celebrating her. Then she added, "I'm not surprised by it at all. Everyone's always trying to get her to wear something, to do something, and for her to just be like, 'Nah, I'm good. I love that.'" And in that moment, Sophie wasn't just commenting on a jersey. She was commenting on the culture, the constant pressure on female athletes to please everyone, to be perfectly agreeable, perfectly polite, perfectly on brand. But Caitlyn Clark didn't play that game, and Sophie loved her for it. That authenticity spoke to something deeper, something Sophie herself has wrestled with for years. The expectations, the criticism, the balancing act of being yourself in a league that sometimes punishes honesty. Sophie's praise for Caitlyn wasn't about football loyalty or team politics. It was about self-respect. And the internet noticed. Clips of Sophie calling Caitlyn awesome went viral instantly. Fans started commenting things like, "Sophie gets it," and "Real recognizes real." It was the kind of organic, genuine moment that no PR department could ever manufacture. But that was just the beginning. Because Sophie wasn't done talking, the podcast rolled on, and as it did, her tone shifted again. The laughs turned into something sharper, frustration, maybe even exhaustion. When the host brought up her recent controversies, especially that infamous rant where she called out WNBA leadership for not knowing the game, Sophie didn't dodge it. She doubled down. "I'm not going back on what I said," she told the host, her voice steady. "Maybe how I said it could have been better, but I meant it." Then she laughed, a quick smirk breaking the tension. "I might have been a little harsh, but it's also just me." Classic Sophie. Half apology, half mic drop. She even explained why she refuses to censor herself. "When I cuss, people think I'm uneducated, but I know what I'm talking about. I just cuss." And honestly, she's got a point. That raw energy, that emotion, it's what makes her real. It's what makes people listen. Sophie isn't afraid to be passionate. She isn't afraid to be loud. And she definitely isn't afraid to call out what she sees as hypocrisy. When asked if she regretted calling out Kathy Engelbert or the WNBA front office, she didn't blink. "No," she said. "Maybe I shouldn't have cussed, but I meant every word." It was the kind of blunt honesty fans rarely hear anymore. No walking on eggshells, no rehearsed answers, just truth. And that truth hit home. Because for all the controversy, all the headlines, Sophie's point was simple. The people making the biggest decisions in the WNBA don't always understand the game the way players do. They might be good business people, she said, but they don't know basketball. That one line alone blew up across the internet. Again, fans and analysts started debating it instantly. Some said she was out of line, others said she was absolutely right. But either way, everyone was listening. And that's the thing about Sophie Cunningham. Whether you love her or can't stand her, you can't ignore her. Even when she's being controversial, she's captivating. Her mix of blunt honesty, country girl charm, and dry humor makes her impossible to tune out. She can roast the league 1 minute, laugh about horses the next, and somehow it all feels natural. That's her magic. By the time the first clips from the podcast started trending, it wasn't just WNBA fans tuning in. Sports networks picked it up. Talk shows replayed her lines. Even NFL fans were chiming in, connecting Caitlyn's jersey moment with Sophie's no-nonsense defense of authenticity. It turned into a conversation bigger than basketball, about loyalty, individuality, and what it means to stay true to yourself when the spotlight gets blinding. But Sophie's honesty didn't stop there. Because when the host asked if she'd been watching the WNBA Finals, her answer sent shockwaves through the league. "Hell no," she said flatly. "I haven't watched a lick of the WNBA. I'm on a break. I need a cleanse." That line instantly became a headline on its own. Fans were shocked. Some were furious, but others completely understood. Because Sophie wasn't saying she didn't care. She was saying she needed space. After a long season filled with injuries, drama, and relentless media coverage, she just wanted to breathe, and she said it exactly how she felt it. "I'm booking vacations," she added, laughing. "I'm done. It's drama, but I'm over it." For once, she wasn't talking as an athlete. She was talking as a person, burned out, tired, and ready to step away for a while. And that honesty, as raw as it was, made her even more relatable. Sophie Cunningham just completely lit up the headlines. And this time, it's not because of a game-winning shot or a viral highlight. It's because of what she said about Caitlyn Clark. Yeah, you heard that right. The moment those words left her mouth, the internet exploded. Clips started flying across Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and fans couldn't believe that Sophie actually went there. Because this wasn't just a casual comment. It was personal, emotional, and brutally honest. And in a league where everyone's been tiptoeing around the Caitlyn Clark conversation, Sophie decided to speak straight from the heart. But before we get into what she said, you have to understand who Sophie Cunningham really is. To some people, she's the villain of the WNBA. To others, she's the fire and grit the league desperately needs. A player who doesn't fake smiles or filter her words. And whether you love her or hate her, you can't ignore her. Sophie's the type of player who brings energy to every court she steps on, who dives for loose balls, talks trash with a grin, and backs up every bit of it with pure hustle. But off the court, she's something different. She's raw, she's funny, and she's unfiltered in the best possible way. That's exactly what fans saw when she sat down for that now famous podcast interview. It started lighthearted, jokes, banter, stories from her time in the league. Everyone was laughing. But then, out of nowhere, the host asked her about Caitlyn Clark. And that's when everything changed. The host leaned in and said, "So, Sophie, what do you really think about all this Caitlyn Clark hype?" You could see Sophie take a breath. That 1 second of silence before she answered said it all. Because she knew whatever she said next was going to be everywhere. And then she just said it. "I love what Caitlyn's doing for the game, but people need to stop treating her like she's untouchable." The room went quiet. The host blinked. And in that moment, you could almost hear the internet waking up. Now, if you've been following women's basketball this year, you know exactly why that line hit like a thunderclap. Caitlyn Clark isn't just a player, she's a movement. She's brought record-breaking viewership to the WNBA. She's sold out arenas. And she's inspired millions of fans. Young girls, families, even people who never watched the league before. She's the face of the new era. But with that kind of fame comes pressure and controversy. Because not everyone in the league feels the same way about how the spotlight's been shining. Some say it's deserved, others feel it's been too much, too soon, and sometimes too one-sided. And that's where Sophie's words struck the deepest nerve. When she said people need to stop treating Caitlyn like she's untouchable, it wasn't an insult. It was a challenge, both to the fans and to the media. She was saying, respect her, celebrate her, but don't forget the rest of us who've been building this game long before she got here. And here's the thing, Sophie wasn't wrong. Because for years, players like Diana Taurasi, Candace Parker, Sue Bird, and others have been grinding, fighting, and carrying the league through eras when few were watching. Now, with Caitlyn's rise, the spotlight feels different. It's bright, but it's narrow. Still, Sophie didn't stop there. She went even deeper. "I like Caitlyn," she said. "I really do. But let's be real. The league isn't built on one player. We all work our butts off every single day. We all bleed for this game." And that, right there, was the moment that made fans split into two camps. Some applauded her. They said, "Finally, someone's being real." Others accused her of being jealous, bitter, or even trying to tear down Caitlyn's momentum. But Sophie didn't seem bothered at all. Because if you know her, you know she's never been afraid of a little heat. She's taken elbows on the court, boos from the stands, and harsh words from social media, and turned all of it into fuel. So when that podcast clip started spreading, Sophie didn't backtrack. She didn't post an apology. She just stood by what she said, and that's when things got even more intense. Because just a few days later, Sophie was spotted at an event wearing a Caitlyn Clark jersey. Yep, you can imagine how that went online. Within minutes, fans were posting side-by-side screenshots. One of her saying, "People treat Caitlyn like she's untouchable," and another of her proudly wearing Caitlyn's jersey. It was chaos. Some said it was sarcasm. Others said it was respect. And some fans, honestly, didn't know what to think. But if you listened carefully to what Sophie said afterward, you'd understand the truth behind that gesture. She wasn't mocking Caitlyn. She was making a point. She later said, "I can disagree with how people act around her and still love what she's doing for the game." Wearing that jersey was me saying, we can compete like hell on the court, but off the court, we're all fighting for the same thing, growth. That one line flipped the entire narrative. Because suddenly, what looked like shade started sounding like solidarity. And that's the part of Sophie Cunningham most people forget. She's passionate, not petty. She's emotional, not envious. And she cares deeply about the sport she's helped build. Still, the internet, being the internet, people weren't ready to move on. They kept debating, analyzing, twisting every word. But for Sophie, the controversy wasn't about attention. It was about truth. Because beneath the headlines and the memes, there's a much deeper story here. One that goes beyond Sophie, beyond Caitlyn, beyond any single moment. It's the story of a league standing on the edge of transformation. A league where fame, legacy, and equality are all clashing in real time. And Sophie Cunningham, whether she wanted to or not, just became the face of that conversation. The fallout was instant. Within hours, sports pages, fan blogs, and even major networks picked up the story. Headlines flashed everywhere. Sophie Cunningham calls out Caitlyn Clark hype. Cunningham's bold take divides fans. Sophie wears Caitlyn's jersey after controversial remarks. Every outlet had its own spin. Some tried to make it a feud. Others tried to turn it into a redemption arc. But for Sophie, it was neither. While social media was tearing itself apart, she was back in the gym, working, sweating, preparing for the next game like she always does. Because no matter what people say online, she knows the only thing that really speaks is performance. Still, the noise was impossible to escape. During pre-game warm-ups, you could hear fans shouting, some cheering, some booing, some even wearing Team Caitlyn shirts in the stands just to make a point. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. When Sophie walked onto the court that night, she didn't flinch. She smiled. That same trademark grin, half confidence, half challenge. And when the ball tipped, she played one of her best games of the season. It was almost poetic. Every shot she made felt like a statement. Every defensive stop said, "I'm here, and I'm not backing down." After the game, reporters swarmed her, asking the same question from every angle. Did she regret what she said? Was she trying to start drama with Caitlyn? Did she think she went too far? And she answered with absolute calm. "I said what I said. Caitlyn's great, she's changing the game, but competition means honesty. I'll always keep it real." That line, "competition means honesty," spread just as fast as her original comment. Because at its core, that's what sports are all about. And yet, behind the scenes, something surprising was happening. While fans were busy arguing, Caitlyn Clark herself was paying attention. And instead of firing back, she took a completely different approach. A few days later, in her own interview, Caitlyn was asked about Sophie's comments. Everyone braced for drama. They wanted fireworks, tension, a rivalry headline. But Caitlyn didn't give them that. She paused, smiled a little, and said, "Sophie's a competitor. I respect that. I think what she said comes from a place of love for the game. Honestly, we all want the same thing. More people watching, more girls playing, more respect for women's basketball." And just like that, the entire tone shifted. In one answer, Caitlyn turned what could have been a feud into a moment of mutual respect. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defensiveness. It was maturity. The kind that shows why she's become such a beloved figure in sports. When Sophie saw that clip later, she smiled too. Because that's what she'd been trying to say all along. The fire, the passion, the competition. It's all part of something bigger. From that moment, everything started to change. The narrative stopped being Sophie versus Caitlyn and became something deeper. Sophie and Caitlyn, two players on different paths, both pushing the game forward. And when their teams finally met on the court again, the energy was electric. The crowd was buzzing, cameras flashing, everyone waiting for a moment of tension. But what they got instead was one of the most powerful images of the season. Late in the game, Caitlyn drove hard to the rim, got fouled, and hit the floor. Sophie was the first one there to help her up. The crowd went silent for a moment, and then applause. Two players, two different styles, one shared respect. That handshake said more than any tweet, any headline, or any interview ever could. After the game, both players hugged at midcourt. Reporters caught it, fans shared it, and suddenly, the internet that once tore them apart was united in admiration. Because people realized this wasn't about rivalry anymore. It was about legacy. Sophie later said, "That's the thing people miss about competition. You can go hard at someone, talk your talk, and still respect the hell out of them. That's what makes this league special. Those words resonated far beyond basketball. They spoke to something real, something every athlete, every fan, and every dreamer could feel. Because behind every headline and hot take, there are real people who've spent their lives chasing a dream, sacrificing everything for a shot, a season, a moment. Sophie's passion, Caitlyn's rise, they're not opposites. They're two sides of the same story. And that's why, weeks later, when Sophie appeared at a youth basketball camp, something beautiful happened. A little girl wearing a Caitlyn Clark jersey walked up to her for an autograph. Sophie smiled, knelt, and said, "You like Caitlyn, huh?" The girl nodded shyly, and Sophie said, "Good, she's amazing, but you can be amazing too." Remember that. That clip went viral, not because of controversy, but because of what it represented: unity, growth, and genuine love for the game. And just like that, Sophie's image started to change. People began to see her not as the league's bad girl, but as one of its most honest voices, the kind that doesn't sugarcoat, doesn't play politics, but always speaks from the heart. Her podcast moment that once caused outrage was now being praised as an example of authenticity, because she dared to say what many were thinking, and she did it without hate. Meanwhile, Caitlyn continued to shine, breaking records, inspiring millions, and carrying the torch of the next generation. And through it all, both women showed what true leadership looks like: strong, confident, competitive, and grounded. In the end, the so-called controversy became something much more meaningful. It sparked a real conversation about respect, equality, and perspective in women's sports. And if you look back now, that single moment, Sophie Cunningham speaking her truth, may have helped push the WNBA one step closer to the balance it's been searching for. Because yes, Caitlyn Clark deserves her spotlight, but so do the dozens of women who built the foundation she's standing on. And Sophie reminded everyone of that, not out of jealousy, but out of love for the game that's been her life. Months later, when the season ended, a journalist asked Sophie if she'd change anything about that interview. She laughed and said, "No, I'd say it again, maybe with a little more grace, but the same heart." And that right there, that's Sophie Cunningham, in a sentence: unapologetically real, fiercely passionate, and always driven by something deeper than the noise. Because when the cameras turn off and the headlines fade, what's left is the same thing that's always been there: a basketball, a court, and a dream shared by every woman who's ever dared to play. And maybe that's why, at the end of it all, this story wasn't about controversy. It was about connection. Two competitors, one league, and one shared belief that greatness doesn't come from being untouchable. It comes from being unafraid. When the dust settled, fans realized something powerful: that sometimes the moments that divide us most, they are the same ones that bring us closer in the end. Sophie Cunningham spoke her truth. Caitlyn Clark answered with grace. And together, without even planning it, they reminded the world why we love this game. Because in basketball, just like in life, it's not about perfection. It's about passion, honesty, and the courage to keep showing up. And that, more than any viral clip or trending headline, it is the real story that will be remembered.